Hi, everybody. Welcome to American Talk It Up. We've been off the air for like 3 weeks because of all the high school games we've been doing during the week. And we finally end their season. But Ed, welcome back to another episode of American Talk It Up.
Oh, thanks, Marty. It has been a while, but I'll tell you, we finally end up the high school season on Saturday with the end of track and field and some great baseball games at Santa Ana Starfield. I don't think we could have asked for a better ending. Some great track field events, and you mentioned the St. Pius Academy Game 3A baseball championship, which will go down as one of the best championship baseball games or championship games, period, that we've ever seen.
I agree. And all this happened because our state didn't play sports during the fall or during the winter months. We tried to cram all our sports in 4 months. That's the way our governor set it up. I'm not happy with it, but that's the way it went. And I will say one thing: the New Mexicans in this state did adapt. That we did everything we could, and in some ways, it's something that's probably never going to happen again. Ed, this is probably so unique. We did make history. And just to give you an idea, ProView Networks did like 469 games, over 550,000 views. Nobody's, matter of fact, I don't think there's a place in the United States did what we did, Ed. It was unbelievable what ProView Networks did and what you did and all of us that was involved. That's why we hadn't had an episode for a while. But I just want to let you know that that game, everything ended on Saturday night, and the last game that was played, it was the 4A state championship between the two biggest rivals in Albuquerque, 4A, Albuquerque Academy versus St. Pius. Both teams I like. I'm a little partial to St. Pius because I used to live across the street from the old St. Pius. But it was one of the greatest games I've ever seen. There's been some great baseball finals, but I've never seen a finals in the top of the, as you know, high school baseball only plays 7 innings. And the top of the seventh inning, Pius was down 4-2. They scored 5 runs, and now they're up 7-4. And then Academy comes in the bottom of the seventh and scored 4 runs on a 3-run double score. It was unbelievable, Ed. I've never seen anything like it.
It really was. And by the way, just some history for you. My brother and sister went to the old St. Pius. I went one year to the old St. Pius. My son went to the Pius on course. And so Pius and Academy has long been, you mentioned, a rivalry, like when you played Manzano, when you played at Sandia, or I played Highland, and Highland and Sandia and Albuquerque High were big rivals. So that game is a big rivalry game. Before the game, I did PA for that, for the championship game. There was hardly anybody there with 5 minutes to go. I'm like, where are the fans? All of a sudden, like the gates just flooded open. You had a full stands for the game, full stands. And when Pius scored 5 in the top of the seventh, they're up 7-4, and they're celebrating. And gosh, and suicide squeeze, by the way, suicide squeeze to run in. They executed and they hit well, but all of a sudden Academy comes up in their bottom half of the seventh, and they get 2 runners on with nobody out, and the kid Johnson hit a bases clearing double to walk them off. I had Academy head coach Chris Alexander on the sports desk this morning, and he was talking about what a great moment that was for the program. Very humble guy. He's played for UNM from 99 to 2003 and still holds the UNM all-time home run record for a season with 25 home runs. He got drafted by the Texas Rangers in the 15th round. He didn't see any pro time, but to listen to him talk about his team, who at one time, Marty, by the way, Academy lost 5 in a row, and then they reeled off 13 wins in a row to win the championship. So what a story by the Chargers, and I think Jeff Symbieta and Chad Patterson did the game for ProView, and what a game that was. What a game.
Well, as you probably know, I grew up across the street from Old Pius, so I knew all the people. And of course, the name like Martin Luther Watts Jr., Father Bacchus said I could only go through the back door. But I love the Pius people. That was one of the great games. Of course, all the people we know, Albuquerque Academy. I mean, if you were just a pure baseball fan, you couldn't beat that game, probably. And I've seen some great finals. Uh, Remember that Cleveland La Cueva final years ago? That was another one. There's been some great ones, but of all fitting of the game that ended the year, of what we've gone through, what New Mexico had it worse than anybody. Nobody went through what we did for sports. And just the last game has to go down as one of the great moments of New Mexico sports. What a great inning for this pandemic season.
Think about this, Marty. We talked about Natalia Chavez, and she hits a half-court shot to win the 5A girls championship for Volcano Vista against Hobbs in overtime. Then this walk-off by Johnson from Academy, they're winning the state championship in 3A baseball. So we had some great endings, and that's what we'll remember. You mentioned the pandemic, and normally around this time of year, June 24th, baseball is long over with. They're already into club ball. This is the latest baseball has ever been played into the season. They give Cleveland Storm credit as well. The Cleveland Storm girls won the softball championship with a 3-0 shutout. They beat, I can't remember who they won. Carlsbad. They beat Carlsbad for the girls championship. So I thought we had some great finishes. And you mentioned the season was hard on everybody. The pandemic was hard on New Mexicans. You know what? I'll be honest, Marty, I think you and I thought about it in March. I didn't think we were going to play. And I think you were at that point too. There one more week and we wouldn't have played. I don't think we would have played. And I was to the point like, we're not going to play. And then all of a sudden, from March to June, I think I worked almost every night. Well, not so much for softball and baseball, although I did 3 games a week for baseball and softball. And so thank God you mentioned New Mexicans being resilient. They adapted. And look at the finishes we had. Cleveland won the girls, the boys 5A track title. Alamogordo won the girls. Some great performances out there on the track on Saturday. So give the track and field and performing in severe heat. It's still very hot on Saturday. So they had to stop the U.S. Olympic trials on Saturday because the heat got to 108 degrees. So let's remember, these athletes had to perform in conditions they're not used to performing in. So they did a great job.
Well, this goes down in history. I hope we never have a season like this again because of a pandemic, but people will never forget this season. And we'll look back. If I live long enough, I'll look back and say what we did, ProView and with the Mexico Activity Association, with all the coaches out there, what we had to endure, especially a lot of those kids wearing masks. I don't know if I would have done it. So to me, it was one of the great seasons that we pulled together. I think we could have played fall sports and stuff, but the fact is, we had to go with what I guess you'd call it with the cards, the way the cards come up. We had to live with it, but we did get through it. And I'm telling you right now, I'm proud of these coaches and the parents. Remember, for up until early May, the parents couldn't even go watch a game indoors, right, Ed? And so it's amazing that we're able to.
That's right. Well, they lifted it for April for the. What did they let in the pit? 25% for state championship in basketball. Yeah. So no, you're right. Outdoors. That's why it was so good to see the crowds out there at Santa Ana Star Field and at the softball field. You had full stands, and then later in the baseball and softball season, the last couple of weeks, stands were full. It was good to see that. And we nobody had to wear masks outside. Then the NMAA finally relaxed their rule, or the governor did, about kids wearing masks outside. They were playing baseball and softball, and up till about 3 weeks ago, they still had to wear masks outside. And finally, they didn't. You saw them on Saturday. The only guy that was wearing one on Saturday was La Cueva head coach Gerard Pineda. But you can understand that his wife's in the hospital. His wife's in the hospital. After the game was over, he's going to go back to Arizona and go check on her. So he had to protect himself. He's the only one that was wearing a mask. Everybody else was maskless. And again, great job by Gerard Pineda with La Cueva beating Carlsbad 11-2 for the 5A title.
Well, they beat Hobbs 11-2.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, they beat Hobbs.
And by the way, why don't you talk about that? The pitcher that had cancer from Pedro Vista, and he came down to Albuquerque to get treatment, and he pitched that last game for La Cueva, and he's the Pedro Vista kid. Why don't you talk about him?
You know what? Mike Magaha, the former Piedra Vista coach, he brought his son Max Magaha here to Albuquerque, and Mike Magaha got on with Coach Pineda as an assistant. And remember, Mike Magaha has won some titles at Piedra Vista. So he comes here to La Cueva because his son Max needed cancer treatment, which is closer here in Albuquerque. And so it was a touching moment at the end. Max Magaha was staked to 11 runs by his team against Hobbs, and they took him out at the top of the 7th. and all his teammates came and gave him, big hugs, man. There was big hugs. Thinking about it now, I get a little bit goosebumps about it. The infield all gave him a big hug. So they gave him I think he got one batter, and then they went to the reliever with one out. They relieved Magaha, and then I guess him and Tyler Jensen, the other La Cueva athlete, track and field athlete, got to be very good friends because Tyler Jensen, who also played football, was also stricken with cancer, and he and Max Magaha have gotten to be kindred souls. Because when you go through cancer, I've had it. I've had thank God it didn't spread in my body. I've had it. A lot of people have had it and had to deal with it, and it's a different thing. It's a different kind of challenge. And a good friend of mine has it from Highland. He's doing good, thank God. But those two found each other, and I thought when I look at that, and I was wondering why they were hugging him so much and patting him on the back. Then after the game, I understood. After journal writer James Yotis wrote about it on Sunday, and so what a great story that was. And La Cueva, Coach Magaha, it had to be hard for Coach Magaha to come here because he's won titles, right? And to come, I don't think he could have asked for a better situation in coaching with Coach Pineda, who's won titles at La Cueva and is one heck of a guy. So prayers out to Coach Pineda's wife out there in Arizona. Hopefully she's doing better.
And Tyler Jensen, he had cancer. He recovered, and he was performing for Cleveland. His family bought a house in the Cleveland district this year.
So that's right. He was at La Cueva. He transferred to Cleveland.
But he wins the javelin on the last throw, 193 feet. So he's the state champion in the javelin, Tyler Jensen. What a fitting ending. Both guys won state titles for each other.
Yeah, that's quite a story. That really is.
And can you imagine on your last jump, and by the way, the state record in the long jump in New Mexico, David Padrell did not get 24.3.5. It's still on the books, Ed, as the longest jump, even though the kid from La Cueva jumped 23.4, and they said it was the 5A record, but back when David Padrell jumped for Highland, it was 3.8. It was 3A in those days,
Yeah.
But that is the oldest record. That was performed in 1970. I was there. I actually jumped 22.8. I came in fourth place. Hell, if I would have jumped 22.8 last Saturday, I might have got a medal. You know what I mean? But with that saying, can you imagine, the Padrells, that's the oldest record on the books right now.
David Padrell was a fantastic track athlete. He still holds some records at Highland, for overall track brilliance and, greatness. So I'll tell you, you competed against some great track athletes back in the day. You sure did.
What was missing on that track meet? David Padrell, that was 51 years ago. When I was growing up, Henry Sanchez was the track coach at Highland. He won all those titles. What was lacking watching the track meet this weekend, Ed, is Highland didn't have much of a presence. They just weren't in it. Highland, it's kind of sad.
It is sad, but you remember one thing: Highland's enrollment and overall numbers, things have changed, and it is sad because back in the day, Highland was one of the best track programs in the state, right, in the city,
maybe in the country.
Yeah, and let me just explain, as someone that's on the Highland Alumni Association board, that they didn't have a baseball team this year. They struggled to field a softball team. They're doing the best they can with the number of students that they have. Remember, they don't get the base kids anymore. That the base kids can go anywhere they want. Back in the day, they used to have to go to Highland. That's where Coach Gentry and Coach Henry Sanchez and later Coach Gary Sanchez got a lot of track athletes from. Coach Gentry got a lot of football athletes from the base. So when they cut your numbers like that, it's hard to really win. It's very hard to win. It's hard to win it's hard to compete like that if you don't have the numbers that you used to have. And Highland used to really dominate. They really did. They dominated in track, and some of the sprinters they had. Terry Landrum, back in the day. You mentioned David Padrell. You mentioned some of the great Highland track athletes of the past. Richard Reisinger. Richard Reisinger was a hurdles guy. And Richard Reisinger was one heck of a track athlete. When I was at Highland, Robert Brown was an amazingly great track athlete. Gosh, he was so athletic. He ran indoor track sprint in the Tingley against Houston McTeer. Against at that time, Houston McTeer was one of the fastest guys in the nation. So when you mention Highland track, man, and it's hard for me to see where they are now. I mean, I still love that school very much. It's just not the same anymore because of enrollment.
So let's set up the scenario. We're talking May of 1970. And that year, David Padrell was jumping 25 feet a couple times, but you got to set the state track record at the state track meet. I'm in third place, 22.8. I've already did my 3 jumps. So David Padrell's first 2 jumps, he fouls. So he's down to his last jump. And I was talking to Louis Martinez, who was on the track team for Highland. I said, Louis, it would be a shame if Padrell doesn't win this because he's dominated everybody. And so Louis said, you know what, Marty? He's jumping. He's going over the board like 5 inches. Why don't we go back and tell him to set his marker back like 5 or 6 feet? So I go back just before his last jump, and I said to him, David, why don't you move your marker back? I think you'll hit the board. And so he goes down on his last jump, and he gets 4 inches before the board, and it's 24.3, and that's been the state record. And look at me, Ed, this is why I get free ribs at Padrell's. and that's a true story, but that's how it went down. And what if Louis Martinez and I didn't tell him? He would have maybe scratched his last jump. It would have been a tragedy if he didn't win it. And now it's the oldest record. It's 51 years on the books.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
Now, we've had guys that we've had Curtis Beach who jumped 23.11. I think we had a guy that jumped 23.9, but nobody's come close to 24.3.5. You think somebody would have done it by now?
You know what? Especially since times have changed and nutrition and training, everything seems to have gotten better. And that's a record that you're right. You would have thought somebody would have come closer to, and they haven't. So that tells you something about that record, which is what, 50 years old. That tells you a lot right there.
And he ran on a cinder track, Ed. It was artificial. It was cinder track at OUNM, at the UNM Stadium. Right. And here's another thing. What I think what made Padrell unique is he had 4.445 speed. He was a 9.5, 9,600 yard dash guy in those days, but he could high jump 6'6". So he had that rare ability like Bob Beamon. He could get up in the air, plus he had great speed in the runway. He had the ingredients to do it. Don't you think, Ed? With speed
Bob Beamon,
and
wow.
ability to jump.
Yeah, man. When you mentioned that, yeah, that kind of athlete right there, Bob Beamon held the world record in Mexico City, I believe, right? So
69 feet.
Yeah, when you mention names like that, yes, David Padrell is an explosive athlete. Yes, and remember, he didn't have all the training that they have today or nutrition, right? He didn't have all access to all that. So I wonder what he would have done with today's training and nutrition. I wonder what he would have done.
The guy that came in second that year was Leroy Spicer from Albuquerque High, and he jumped 23.7.
Really?
He was leading the track meet. I was in third place. I was thinking, I was telling Louis Martinez, hey, I'm going to get a medal, but I came in fourth. But you know, any other year, 22.8 would have won it or came in second or whatever. It was a good jump, but not as good. But anyway, hey, we got a break for our sponsors right now. And Jimmy, you want to talk about our sponsor, our environmental sponsor that kills COVID? Can we put that spot on, Jimmy? Are you ready for it? I think he is. But right now we're being sponsored by Everguard Roofing and Solar. And you know what? I want to tell you something, Ed. You can right now with these rebates, you can get 26% off your tax break. As long as your electrical bill is $150 a month, it's worth putting solar in and roofing solar in, and they'll pay for itself on a long-term lease. So that might be, people are looking for something to go off grid, and especially with these electrical. Has your electrical bills gone up for a long time?
Yes, especially during the summer. Yes.
And so we've got Jimmy. Do you want to play that commercial for Thrive Redux, our environmental product? Do you have that up there?
Yeah, we'll just go with it. I'm not going to play it right now.
All right, so we'll get back with it later, and then we want to thank Extreme Cleaning. They've been talking about getting your carpet clean in the summertime. They're the place to go, and I want to tell you now, starting July 1st, Ed, we're supposed to be 100% open for restaurants. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And so now I will tell our patrons out there, people watching this podcast, please support your restaurants here in New Mexico. They really do need the help. And, I've been going to places with patios. Have you? I've been out 3-4 times where I sat on the patio. It was kind of nice, outdoor patio.
Right. No. There's got some good patios. My wife and I like to go to O'Neill's here in the Highland neighborhood. We go there, and then we sit outside once in a while.
Yeah, and so anyway, so we want to support these restaurants, especially the people on Route 66, Geckos, the Artichoke Cafe, all those people. We want to support them. So it's very imperative. But I would check if you're looking for a way to get a tax write-off, get a refund. They've got a package now at Everguard Roofing and Solar, especially the solar package. And so you might want to check it out, Everguard Roofing and Solar. Now, hey, Ed, so let's get back to America Talk It Up. Now we've got July 4th coming up. And what are you planning on doing on July 4th? Are you going to stay home and barbecue with the family?
We talked about that, and I think pretty much we're going to have my granddaughter and my son and his girlfriend over, and my brother-in-law, and probably my sister, and just have a barbecue here at home, and maybe light off some fireworks for my 3-year-old granddaughter, who will probably appreciate them more than she did last year. She's at that age now where she's a lot more aware, talking a lot more. So that's the small plans, the small family plans. What about you?
Well, I just re-landscaped my backyard. I put in a brand new garden in. So we're gonna have some barbecue, and we're gonna sit back and play some music. A little bit of patriotic music, a little bit of fun. So that's gonna be. But what's historical about July 4th? We're talking about the Civil War. 2 famous battles were fought on July 4th. One battle was the Battle of Gettysburg, and think about it, Ed. If the North would have lost that battle, that might have changed the history of our country. It might have changed it.
You know what?
If the North didn't prevail.
To this day, it's a mystery why Confederate General Robert E. Lee chose to attack a fortified Union center. Even General Longstreet had asked him, you know what, General? He told him that part of the Union defense is strong. He kind of recommended an attack somewhere else, but General Lee, and a lot of people later said they don't know if he was quite right at that battle because it was unlike him. He was a brilliant general, brilliant. I disagreed with his politics as far as other things, but as far as a general, he was brilliant. He was a brilliant general. But that day, that decision to attack that fortified Union center, and the rebels fought hard that day. They did. They fought hard. Now, it wasn't an overwhelming victory for the North because General Meade didn't pursue them. He let them go, and the Confederate Army would never penetrate that far into Union territory for the rest of the war. So, really, in a sense, after that war was over. It took 2 more years, and then there's a high price to pay that day at Gettysburg. A high price to pay, but President Lincoln was very upset with General Meade because he didn't go pursue them. Union General George Meade, he didn't go chase them down. And I've read a lot of books about Civil War. And General Meade tells President Lincoln, we had a council of war, and we decided not to do that. And President Lincoln says, conduct no councils of war, go pursue them. And by that time, they were gone. So it was a huge battle and a momentum-changing battle as far as the overall direction of the war, because before then, Robert E. Lee had beaten Union generals McDowell, McClellan, Joseph Hooker. He pretty much had his way with, as far as being able to attack and run, attack, run, attack, run, attack, run. Now, this one here was a penetration into Union territory, and the North held them off. And there was a Joshua Chamberlain, Union Lieutenant or Colonel Joshua Chamberlain. I can't remember what ridge it was. A big Union hero that day, because the rebels were about ready to overrun that flank, and Sergeant Chamberlain made sure that they didn't for the Union. A lot of different ways, a lot of different scenarios that could have gone either way, and the North won that battle. And really, the South after that never penetrated Union territory deep ever again. That was it. That was really it.
In that battle, the North had the high ground on Cemetery Hill, Cemetery Ridge.
Right, Cemetery Ridge.
And that was the battle, one of the first battles the North had, the repeating rifles, where you can get 6 shots off, repeating rifles. And then they had all that cannon. It was like suicide. It was almost like a World War I in the Battle of Somme, where they just went over the top, and the Germans had the machine guns just mowed them down. And that was what Pickett's charge was.
Pickett's charge.
And Longfellow said, we don't need to fight this battle. They've got the high ground. They've got the power. Why not move off this ground and find a better place to fight them? But as you know, Lee says, we've got the enemy here. We're going to go after him. And of course, Pickett's charge, they got mowed down. And they had those repeated rifles, the North did, and with the cannon fire, it was. And then you're right. The thing is, Meade didn't follow through on that fight.
No, he didn't. And they said later that General Longstreet and George Pickett, General Pickett, went to go visit Robert E. Lee after the war. And General Pickett had not forgot that. He had not forgot it. And he told General Longstreet, that man got my division killed. He got them all murdered. He was still mad. He was still mad about it. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Gettysburg, Martin Sheen as Robert E. Lee, Tom Berenger as General Longstreet. I can't remember who played General Pickett, but General Lee says to General Pickett, you must look to your division, sir. And General Pickett tells him, sir, I have no division left. It was dramatic, man. It really was. And again, a battle fought, one of the most horrendous battles as far as men losing their lives fought on American soil in American war history. But it turned the tide. The Confederate high tide, they called it, right? It turned the tide in favor of the Union. And then about a year later, that's when President Lincoln names General Grant as the commander of all U.S. armies. And General Grant was a guy that was not going to stop. He was going to feed division after division after division. He didn't stop. He pursued Robert E. Lee until finally he boxed him in at Appomattox Courthouse. And that was it. It took him a little while, but I think that battle at Gettysburg was a turning point in the Civil War for sure.
What's your feeling on slavery? Why the South was defending slavery?
They said it was their way of life. It had a lot to do with their economy. Of course, I told you I'm not for that at all, right? And so I think that's what they said, that they were defending their way of life. One of the things said during the movie Gettysburg, as I remember a guy saying this, and this is Hollywood. I don't know if it was said or not by the South, but one guy says, we don't want a government in Washington telling us what we can do, what we can and can't do. So, remember, slavery had a lot to do with their economy as far as cotton and it had a lot to do with that, the free labor they got. So they were going to defend that to the end. But remember, it's an oxymoron to me when you say we got freedom for some, but we don't have freedom for others. And slavery to me, I visited a plantation in Jacksonville in Georgia. I visited a plantation about 5-6 years ago, former plantation. I saw where slave quarters were held. And it really hit me. It really did. It was one of the worst institutions ever visited on this nation, on this country, on this world. Slavery in any form. I don't care if it's what color people are. I can't stand that. To see any person in bondage is wrong. It's horrible, wrong. So they did defend that. They defended that to the end. And you remember, they defended it really, till 100 years later, they were still trying to deny African Americans access to housing, to voting, to a lot of other things that, 100 years later, they still thought that war was being fought. So, yeah, I hated the cause of it. I couldn't stand it. I thought the South was absolutely wrong, and I'm glad they lost the war. But I was a reader of the war because 1861 through 1865, there's some brilliant people that you read about, right? Lincoln, Grant, General Lee, Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson, Jeb Stuart from the South, right? And remember, Marty, that a lot of these generals had fought together in the Mexican-American War. They were on the same side. And then, 12 years later, they're opposing each other. So there's a lot of backdrop to that story, to that war. And I'm sure glad the South lost. I'm very glad they lost. But as far as an overall historical perspective, that's that war. I have books I still haven't read. I've got about 20 books here on the Civil War. So that war there to me always amazed me, and it still does. It really does.
So let's put this question. 91 when they had the Constitution Convention in Philadelphia, at the, Independence Hall. Remember they had that special convention to decide to form the Constitution. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? And Ben Frank, and they made a compromise with slavery. They decided in order to bring the nation together, the 13 colonies in one nation, they compromised that you could have slavery in those states, and they counted like 1/5 of a man or something like that. And then Ben Franklin got up and said, folks, if we don't solve the slavery thing, this is going to come back to tear this country apart. And that was 1791 or something like that, 1790 when they had the convention. And sure enough, 60 years later, we had the Civil War. But would we be a united country if we didn't allow slavery back in 1790? But we still had to resolve this 60 years later.
You know what? That's a great question. And I look at where we are today as a country. And look, there's people who are going to blame President Obama, President Trump, President Coolidge, Hoover, Roosevelt, Lincoln. There's enough blame to go around, right? There really is. I think that's a legitimate question. And maybe, remember the stains of slavery and the things that it, oh my God, the Underground Railroad with Harriet Tubman, right? I think about all the things that African Americans and people of color have had to endure in this country. Let's be honest about it. It's still the greatest country in the world. Nobody's saying that. So I don't want anybody to think, oh, it's not an American. And my right to speak as an American, my First Amendment right, covers me too, whether people want to hear it or not. That's just the way it is. But I think it's a good question. What you said, if that question is solved in 1791 and there's no slavery going forward, is it a different country? We have a different look altogether, right?
The convention was held May 14th to September 17th, 1787, the Constitution Convention. Now think about it. The guys in that room, there wasn't any black person in the room. There was no Native American representing the Native Americans. It was a bunch of white guys, if you want to know the truth, right? There wasn't a woman in there either. It was all a bunch of plantation owners or property owners, George Washington, all these rich people. You know what I mean? And of course, Jefferson was a slave owner. Washington did release his slaves when he died in 1793 or whatever, or 96. But the fact is, there was no the black people did not have representation in that convention. And then Ben Franklin, the wise old, at that time Ben was in his 80s. He got up and said, if we don't solve this problem, it's going to tear this country piece by piece. But they compromised. By compromising with the southern states, they were able to have a constitution. But it came back 500,000 people dying because we couldn't solve that problem. But probably in 1787, we weren't ready for solving that problem at that time. What do you think?
There's no way. There's no way. The other thing is this, and you make a lot of good points here. After the war ended, now they said that Lincoln, if he had lived, wanted to treat the South and bring them back in. He wanted to, to bring them back in, and he wasn't going to be cruel or or treat them, with impunity. He wanted them back. He wanted them back. Now, when he got shot and killed, Andrew Johnson, who's absolutely one of the worst presidents in U.S. history, went after the South. He wanted revenge, and he should have never been president. He was awful. So, but I got to ask this though, and this is, how would Lincoln have dealt with it had he lived? It was going to be trying times, man. It was, because you've got people that were enslaved and and owned by other people, right? Now all of a sudden they're free. So I wonder what he would have done as far as education, things like that for African Americans at that time, because you just can't say you're free. We've got to have a plan, right? Now looking back, I don't know if they had that plan, because it's a problem, an issue that maybe they didn't think about back then, right? How are we going to assimilate all these people into our culture? We've never educated them. They weren't allowed to read or go to school. So I don't know how Lincoln, I've always thought that. How would he have dealt with that? Now, Abraham Lincoln, when he died, he wasn't, before he got assassinated, there was a lot of people taking shots at him, right? I mean, a lot of people didn't like him, didn't like what he did. But when he got killed, he got assassinated. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton says at his bedside, "Now you belong to the ages." Now, in other words, you're a legend now, right? He's a legend. Had he lived, how would he have dealt with that slave problem? How would he have dealt with it as far as, what would he have done? It would have been a huge, I think he would have handled it better than Andrew Johnson did with Reconstruction and things, the rise of the KKK. I'm not blaming that all on Andrew Johnson. I just think Lincoln would have handled that better, but boy, it would have been a huge, so many things he would have had to deal with. So I've always found that kind of interesting too.
So the Constitution was ratified in 1789. Slavery's been a human institution for 5,000 years. And here's the thing, when the war ended, 97% of the African American population couldn't read or write. Only 3%. And so now think about it. How can you assemble these people into society? They can't read and write. What kind of jobs they can do? Mostly labor, right? A lot of them was crop. They were what they call sharecroppers in the South. It wasn't until the late 18th century the blacks migrated to the factories of the North, and then at the early 20th century with the car manufacturing in Detroit, a lot of migrations to Chicago. But even then with the Jim Crow laws, they didn't have rights. It's been a long progress for sure. But think about it. Can you imagine only 3% of them could read or write in 1865?
Well, remember even Roots, the old series Roots, which I remember watching that. And I remember if they were even the slaves, if they even said anything about reading or writing, you could get killed. They could execute you if they owned you back then. You didn't mention anything about reading or writing. They didn't want you to be educated. They didn't. Same reason 100 years later, they didn't want you to vote. They didn't want you to exercise that right. Let's be honest. Now, I hate to say this. There's been a lot of people that don't want to see, they mention equality, they mention freedom, but they don't want everybody to be equal, nor do they want people to be free. They don't. There's a certain faction of people, not everybody, that don't want to see that ever. Let's be honest. We have to be honest about that.
So we really didn't become an American country until 1865. But the flight of the African Americans didn't get much better until the 1960s with the civil rights. It's been a long progress for all these people. And we still have problems in the inner city. The highest crime rate in America is the African American inner city. And 76% of the families don't have only a single parent. And a lot of it's, and then right now the African American community has the lowest graduation in high school, and not all of it, but what I'm saying, that there's still problems out there that get these people back, in the normal society. So it's been a problem. But with that saying, it's like American baseball. You look at all the records up until 1946, you couldn't say that American baseball was equal until Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1946. And so I would say, even though Babe Ruth put up some great records, Lou Gehrig, but what if the African Americans could have played, it would have been a different story, wouldn't you think? And so really, whatever happens after 1947, I don't think is a true record in American baseball. Don't you agree?
Well, a lot of people feel like that. If you think about
After 1947.
right, the Negro leagues were amazing with Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige and a cool Papa Bell. There's a lot of great players in that league that should have played in the major leagues for sure. And then they called Josh Gibson the Black Babe Ruth. Josh Gibson, by the way, Petey Gibson, the great Lobo guard, that's his grandfather, the legendary Lobo Petey Gibson. And so, yeah, you got to remember there's a lot of things you say. People of color weren't given the same chances for a long time. And one thing we have to stop though, and I'll say that is we need more unity, right? I mean, we're Americans. We talk about America talks it up, right? America talk it up. And today we're talking about America and its origins, its inception, what it's gone through, where it's at now. Where are we at as a nation, as a country? I keep thinking about that every day. And yet, you know what? You're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but you've got Democrat friends, I've got Republican friends, right? And so I may disagree with some of the things you say, but what did Patrick Henry say? I'll fight for your right to say that. I'm not about to tell you how to think. You can't tell me how to think. What we need, though, is more, less divisiveness and more coherence as Americans. Why are we here? Where do we come from, right? We all contribute. We all contribute. It's not just one race. It's not just one party. In fact, politics should be kept as far out of that as an American, right? I mean, yes, I'm of Mexican descent, but I've never spent one day in Mexico, man. I live here. I live in the United States, and we're all proud. We all came from somewhere, right? We did. But I think as a nation, as a country, we have to figure out what unites us more than what divides us. And it's been sad to me to see every day, and I'm saying this is from the left and the right. I watch CNN, they trash the right. I watch Fox, they trash the left. Right now, it's up to you to make up your mind what you believe, right? What do you believe? But I just think we need more unity. We need more sticking together as a country, because I'm telling you, at 245 years old, we're a shaky democracy right now. I think we're shaky, man. And we shouldn't be like that. We should be, I feel, a lot stronger and more inclusive of other people and cultures. That's what makes us so strong, I think. That's just me.
So, according to the African American economist Thomas Sowell, he's been on TV.
Yeah, I know who he is.
He thinks that the blacks were better off economic in the 40s, only with the Great Society of LBJ in the 60s destroy a lot of black communities. And I lived in Chicago, and I've been to the south side of Chicago, and I've seen some of these communities destroyed by I would say, the Great Society. But with all that saying, there's good or bad on all that. And of course, FDR New Deal pulled back I think the black advancement in the 50s. But right now, the biggest problem right now is the inner city. Chicago's are averaging 35, 50 shootings a weekend. And it's black killing black. And they have the highest level of going to prison. And so these black mayors got to do something, Ed, because doesn't seem like things are getting better. Matter of fact, when I was living in Chicago, it was bad then, but it's gotten worse. And I don't know if gun control is the answer. I think a lot of it, most of the guns are bought by the criminals are on the black market. You don't see criminals. Very few criminals are buying guns at the store. Am I right? Unless there's been some shootings, they've been able to trace it back. But we've got those are the issues that we need to go solve. Whoever's in power, they've got to solve this inner city problem, because it's getting out of hand, I think, and I don't know. I'm not crazy about some with the Olympics coming up. I do want people to honor the American flag in our country. That one woman in the hammer throw, I know she's a great athlete, but if she doesn't care about, if she thinks they're so bad, why is she representing the Olympics? But anyway, she has her right to say what she wants, but I don't think I think she's in the minority of what her beliefs are. Most people are proud to go to the Olympics and represent them, so I don't know. It's kind of, it's funny. I was talking to a guy today that was personal friends with Billy Mills. Remember Billy Mills, the
long distance runner,
Native American? He won the 10,000 meters back 60 years ago in Tokyo, 1964 Olympic. He's the last American to win the 10,000 meters. But he was telling a bunch of people the other day, these people should be proud. He said, yes, the Native Americans are still have needs, and I'm working on that, but you should be proud representing your country. Don't make it a scene. And he's coming from a Native American. So anyway, I think these Olympics are going to be interesting. I think I was watching the Olympic trials. I think it's the best Olympic trials I've seen in track and field in a long time. Boy, do we have some talent going to Tokyo.
You know what? They said that at least track and field, when do the Americans lose, man? The United States is always strong in track and field. And they said women's gymnastics, the team is so deep, they expect a lot of gold medals. I was watching Simone Biles, my wife and I, the other night. We were watching her, and she's just a freak of nature. Incredible. One of the greatest women gymnastics athlete I've ever seen. And I saw Olga Corbett. I saw her. I saw Nadia Comaneci. And I've seen Simone Biles is incredible. That explosiveness, I don't know where she gets it from. That athleticism, her floor routines. Now, she had some faux pas on Saturday night. She's human. But I'll tell you what, she's amazing. She really is. So I'm looking forward. I love the Olympics.
So,
yeah.
Talking about racial, did you know there's 8 or 9 people going to Tokyo? They're 50% white, 50% black. What do you call that? Biracial or whatever? And that's what it's changed. Trae Young, the great basketball player for the Hawks, his mother's white, his dad's black, and he represents a new breed of athletes. Different racial. So what do you call them? You call them multi. What? How would you label those people?
Yeah, that's probably something for someone to answer.
Obama.
Yeah, that's a good question because Dak
Barack
Prescott.
Obama.
Yeah, Dak Prescott, same thing. Same thing with Dak Prescott. He's half white and half black.
8 of these athletes are going. Their father's white, their mother's black. It's kind of in some ways, that tells you about America is coming together as a racial climate. You've got more interracial, more intermarriage now, where the mix is coming more and more than this year than ever in these track and field championships. Don't you think?
Looks like it. Yeah, it sure does.
And what's a great story about this Trae Young? I know I don't think that the Hawks are going to beat the Bucks in a 7-game series, but Trae Young really is coming out. His coming out party has been great. That kid grew up in a neighborhood in Norman, Oklahoma, a middle class neighborhood. His mom and dad. He delivered the paper up until he was 16 years old. He hadn't had a car. And he grew up, his best friend was Drake Stoops, Bob Stoops' son, who's now playing for OU. This Trae Young, what a great story from Oklahoma. This kid's become a great ball player.
Questionable for tonight because he stepped on an official's foot, and he's got a bone bruise in his right foot. But I'll tell you what, that floater is unstoppable. He's got blow by speed, and then he'll shoot from 35 feet. Then he's got Collins and Capella he can lob to the rim at. So he's really hard to stop.
So think about it, Ed. Everybody talks about these great athletes coming from the inner city. Here's a kid that grew up in a town of 60,000, mostly a white neighborhood, okay? He grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, a good Christian kid. He loved to hang out at Waffle House for pecan waffles. Here's a kid. You would never think that a great ball player would come out of a little town like that, but that's his story. Isn't that a great story coming out of little Oklahoma, a little town?
He's an amazing basketball player.
Now, his
really
father
is.
was a great. I saw his dad play at Texas Tech. His dad was a great ball player. But
okay, all right.
But he's comes from a good family, and so it's good to see him and playing well. I don't know if he's going to play tonight, but I hope he gets in. He has I guess a bone bruise on his heel, right?
On his right foot. No, I think they said he's questionable. I would expect he'll be out there. I would expect him to be out there.
Here, I'm sorry, I was muted here, but you're seeing more interracial athletes now, more and more, and especially this U.S. Olympic trials, you saw more of that. So that's great to see. You're seeing so many people coming together. That's why they people say, let's come together and be proud of the United States. what we are. Yeah, we're not perfect, Ed. We still got a long ways to go racially. There's a lot of things we can get better, but we've got, as you said, we've got to unite as a country. We can't let this stuff tear us apart.
You know what? I'll tell you, I've never said this, and I think we're more closer to that than I ever thought we would ever be. So I just hope, for better days for America. It's still a great country. Still, to me, the greatest country that there is. So you're right. We need to focus on what makes us strong, that unites us, right, rather than divides us. You went to Sandia. You played sports with a bunch of different athletes from different backgrounds. So did I. And I worked in the city with different races, different cultures, and I learned so much from that. And I just think there's so much we can learn.
So let me ask you this question. I was talking to Billy Gonzalez, Carl Miranda, half of my neighborhood was basically Hispanic, probably the same thing with you, right? The neighborhood you grew up in.
Actually, we had a lot of mixed, mixed. We had a lot of Anglo people too. A lot.
And I grew up in the Northeast Heights, but I was talking to Billy Gonzalez and Carl Miranda a month ago, and I asked him this question. I've known you since the third grade. Have you ever felt anybody was racial to you growing up? And we couldn't think of one incident. Now Carl moved to Dallas, Texas to get a job, and he felt like they were racial against Hispanic people in Dallas back in the 70s because he was going to get a job in Dallas, but he never said anything about New Mexico. So he saw races as a Hispanic person when he moved to Texas, not New Mexico. But Billy and us, we all grew up here in Albuquerque. We didn't experience that much. Now, there was very few Black people at Sandia High School. I think we only had 3 African Americans. You had more in your school, but I don't know. I never asked that to them. But did you experience any racism growing up in your neighborhood? Because the guys I grew up, they don't remember that. Do you?
No, not enough. Not in my neighborhood. I never could say that I felt like that in New Mexico. Although I got to say this, that there was a cleaner place on Nob Hill, and this is 10 years ago. And I go in there, only in 2010. I go in there to write a check for my cleaning, and I got a check, and this lady says, "What's the address of your bank?" And I said, "What's the address of my bank?" I never been asked that, right? And then it dawned on me. She was asking me that because she thought I was some illegal. That's the honest to God's truth. And I called the owner the next week. I said, "What's going on here? I've never had a check bounce. Why is your person asking me what's the address of my bank?" Which nobody asked anybody. You know that. I know why it was asked. And I just never went to that place again. So no, I didn't feel any prejudice growing up here. But that happened in my adult life just 11 years ago. So we have to remember it does exist. It does.
Yeah, but I'm just telling you, the neighborhood I grew up, I was very fortunate. I had a lot of Hispanics in my neighborhood. And remember when I was growing up, the Hispanic population in Albuquerque became middle class in the 50s and 60s. Remember, people bought homes out there in the Heights,
Oh, yeah.
It was a move up. And so I was very fortunate. I grew up in a neighborhood. We didn't see each other. We didn't hate each other. We liked each other. We hung out together. Matter of fact, the 2 Black persons that went to my high school, they became homecoming king because people, I don't know if they felt sorry because they were African Americans, but they were the most popular guys at Sandia High School.
Well, I hope they didn't, because everybody deserves that chance no matter what color, right?
Right.
So yeah.
But with that saying, we've still got a long ways to go, Ed. It's not perfect. I'm not saying it. And so anyway, we've got to end this segment, American Talk It Up. Hey, thank folks for being patient. We had a lot of sports to do in June. Ed was doing 3 or 4 games a week, 2 games a day. I mean, you're doing a lot.
No, it's fun. I had a lot of fun. You know what? I broadcast sports for my retired job. How bad is that? So I'm having a great time.
And we've got the Lobo All-Star game coming up on July 11th. And I'm going to have the Army National Guard band. They're going to play the fight song. I'm going to have a band and the color guard from the Army National Guard. That's good news. It's going to be 30 All-Stars are coming.
Yeah,
And Ed's gonna be on the sideline interviewing celebrities. He's gonna interview the players, some of our sponsors. Ed's gonna be the roaming. You're gonna have a busy day.
And
then
I'm
we've
looking
got-
forward to it. It's gonna be fun.
We're gonna have the dunk contest, 3-point. I think it's gonna be Ed. You've got the best job. You're gonna be talking to all the stars.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
And so that's July 11th. So, folks, we've got to call it quits tonight. But thank you for watching America Talk It Up. Go to our website, go to our Facebook page, hit the like button, or go subscribe to our channel on our YouTube channel. So, folks, thank you very much. And thanks for coming back.
You bet, Marty. Have a good one. Thanks, Jimmy.